Good afternoon, ladies, and thank you for joining us in Far Above Rubies today. I'm so glad that each of you are here. Today's focus for your reading challenge is going to be Acts chapter 26. Now, many of you have heard this chapter preached in sermons, and I know that I cannot do as much justice to it as some of the great men of God that I have personally heard speak on this topic. But I'm going to bring to you just a short nugget from this chapter. For those who are not familiar, Paul finds himself standing before King Agrippa, still in chains, still trying to plead his case, and the king gives him space to speak. He gives him space to tell his story. And of course, when Paul is given the chance to tell his story, that story has to involve his conversion and has to involve relationship with Jesus and a plea for anyone who's listening to him to come and follow after Jesus with him. Now, the pivotal moment we find in this story is not Paul's. The pivotal moment we find in this story lands squarely on King Agrippa's shoulders. After listening to Paul's testimony, he looks at Paul and he thinks for a minute, and he looks at him, he says, "Almost thou hast persuaded me. Almost thou persuadest me to become a Christian. You have almost convinced me, Paul. Almost. Your story was powerful. You've told me what I need to do, but I'm almost convinced." And he goes about his way. He deals with Paul, he handles Paul's situation, but we're going to focus on King Agrippa here for a moment. Almost I am persuaded. Almost I am persuaded. I can't help but allow my imagination to wonder how many people, how many souls would have been influenced by King Agrippa if he had decided to become a follower of Jesus, if he had been fully persuaded to become a Christian in the company of Paul in this moment. If he had chosen this road instead of that road, how many souls would have been saved because of the influence of this man? How many souls were not reached? Or how many people had to pick up the slack of ministry that could have been influenced by one man in King Agrippa? It makes me think of Jonah and how it took him days and days to be persuaded to follow the call of the Lord. It took him days to be persuaded, to be fully persuaded that the Lord had called him to Nineveh. How many people died not having turned to the Lord in that short time frame between the time God called Jonah and the time that Jonah was fully persuaded? How many people in that generation did not have to die in the wilderness with Moses, whenever Moses and many of that generation were not fully persuaded of what the Lord could do, of what God was capable of delivering into their hands, of the promises and the miracles that were promised and laid at their feet, and yet they weren't fully persuaded. And the Lord said, "You won't see the promised land because you have not been fully persuaded, and I'm going to give it to a generation that is fully persuaded." How many souls, how many family trees were affected by King Agrippa in this crossroads of his life, not being fully persuaded? My sweet, sweet sister, whether it's salvation, like King Agrippa was standing in his moment having to decide and be persuaded or not, maybe that's what you're dealing with. Maybe you're struggling with whether salvation is for you, whether this Jesus Christ is for you. Don't turn away from this moment. Be fully persuaded that Jesus is for you and that he loves you and that he has your answer. Maybe your persuasion is hanging on the fence of healing or the power of God, the miraculous that he is able to do. Be fully persuaded. You don't know how many lives will be touched, how many other miracles will be performed because of the faith that you allow to be built up in your life when you are fully persuaded. Maybe it's a calling that the Lord is trying to convince you of there, sweet sister Jonah. Maybe there's a calling that the Lord has for you, and there are people that are waiting. There are souls that are waiting. There are souls that are dying, waiting for you to be fully persuaded. Be fully persuaded. Go read Acts chapter 26. Let this story resonate in your heart and ask God to show you wherever the situation you find yourself is, that you are waiting to be fully persuaded, Grab hold of it. Grab hold of the Lord and all that he has for you. Be fully persuaded today. Don't let Judgment Day find you and you stand before the Lord and you say, almost, Lord, almost I was fully persuaded. Almost doesn't quite cut it. Be fully persuaded in the Lord today. I love you all. If no one's told you lately, you are loved. You are cherished. You are more valuable than you could possibly know and understand. You have worth, my friend, and that worth is far above rubies. Thank you for being here today, and I will see you all tomorrow. God bless you.